How's everyone doing?
We're doing good, I think.
That's good. All of you are still alive. I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah, yeah, that's a low threshold, I think. But might be a fair one these
Yeah.
days.
Good. Good.
Yes, so now it's 8:30, so let's start the meeting. Um, yeah, so welcome to this English follow-up meeting from the Chemical Group meeting for February 2021, first meeting of the year. This is the agenda for today. So first, we're going to start off with upcoming news and some updates regarding the legislative work that's been done, the standards that's been updated, and also the updates of our chemicals guide. Then we'll also are going to present the presentations done by external presenters on the Swedish meeting, and present the guidelines for choosing sustainable fire protection, and also about the extended producer responsibility for textiles. We will also touch upon the presentation that the Swedish Chemical Agency did on last Friday in Swedish. And then at the end of the meeting, we're going to talk a little bit about our focus areas for 2021, and also present a series of upcoming webinars where we also want you to give us some feedback regarding some questions. And there are not so many participants in this meeting, so I think that we can be a bit softer on this rule. So if you want to ask a question, I think it's fine if you unmute yourself and ask it, as well as write it in chat, and we can address it. Yes, and we follow the RISE recommendations regarding physical and digital meetings, meaning that the two next coming meetings in April and in June are going to be digital as well. But we still have a possibility to maybe have our first physical meeting in September. And in addition to these digital meetings, we will have shorter webinars on specific substances. We have already put in 2 different webinars, and we will send out a formal invitation to you today regarding this. The first one is about our database chemical. Another one is about alternative assessments on DDR treatments. Both of those include workshops. Stefan will present them in more detail later. And both of those will actually be in English, so I think this is of interest for you. And this is the Chemical Group team. Today we have Stefan, Malin, Anna-Karin, and me who's presenting. Yes, and you can also contact us through this email, but I think that you already know that. Yes, and something that we fixed with the new web page for these meetings is that we have now uploaded all the meetings into the calendar at our new web page, meaning that you can actually access both the Zoom link through the web page. You can also upload or download these meetings to your calendar. So if you want to have them as placeholder ahead, you can actually download them in advance already. Yes. So now to the regulatory news. This is a slide that we've shown before. And as you are aware, we have now passed all these different dates. And last year was a quite intense year when it comes to enforcing new restrictions decided a couple of years ago. For us now, we don't have any upcoming restrictions coming this year because we passed all of this. But for those who've worked with this, might think that's a good thing for us. But that's the main message I want to say, showing you this slide, that we actually passed a period now where quite many different new restrictions for textiles has come into place. But we'll have suggested regulations upcoming. But this has to first be decided upon within the European Union or in Sweden before they are put into force. So we have presented the Swedish textile tax for you before. We're gonna touch upon that briefly. Another thing that we also talked about before is the new restriction in REACH regarding skin sensitizing substances. This restriction proposal has come quite far. So we expect that we will have a decision on this this year. But as you know, there's also like a period, time period between when the restriction is decided and when it's enforced. But that will definitely be a big thing for us to look into, because it's quite a big group of different substances that are covered by this. Then we have a couple of more substance-specific restrictions. We have a flame retardant, which is already in the guide because it's a substance of very high concern. There's a restriction proposal about this. The PFXA restriction in REACH we have talked about before, and given some input into the legislative process. But there's still we're still quite far from getting a final restriction there. Then we have a restriction proposal about formaldehyde emitters, might be relevant. We have a UV stabilizer. There's another PFAS substance which might be restricted in the POPs regulation, and also we have a proposed restriction about D4, which is already included in the candidate list, but might also be included in a restriction. We will touch upon those different points some more. So this is a slide that I made to update you on the development of the textile tax. And from a public perspective, there is no update. So this is still something that's on the table of the Ministry of Finance. So they haven't taken any action since the referral round who finished last October. Something that is interesting is that it's not included in a list of proposed laws to put into the parliament by the government. So this is an indication that it's not so high in priority. But we still know that it's supposed to be a part of the budget for 2022 in Sweden. So we still have a risk of it being implemented next year, and it can go quite fast, unfortunately. A very positive thing, though, is that there's a political opposition on this tax, and not only from the parties not part of putting this forward, but also within the parties who's actually behind the proposed tax. They see that after the referral round, that the criticism made by the industry, but also by the different agencies, like the Swedish Chemical Agency and customs and so on. They give quite serious criticism, meaning that we don't think that the tax proposed by the inquiry it won't be put forward in that form exactly. So we have had some point success there actually. Unfortunately, it's hard to say if in what way this tax will be modified. But we have together with or through actually the Swedish Trade Union, Svensk Handel, and and TECO offered to help them in order to make this better, or at least help them highlight the issues with the proposed tax. So there's an ongoing process here, but we can't really give you any clear update on how it's proceeding. And we also have this tax on hazardous chemicals, or certain hazardous chemicals in electronics. This tax has been in place since 2007, and now the Swedish government has given the Swedish Tax Authority and the Swedish Chemicals Agency an assignment of evaluating tax, and we heard Chemi present their results on how they think the tax has affected the industry. But we also they also have an assignment of suggesting improvements, and one way they do this is that they consult with industry, and we were part of a meeting where suggestions for tax improvements were discussed. This part 2 of the investigation will be submitted to the government on the 1st of March, meaning that giving input to this is a bit too late, but we'll wait with big interest on how the proposed tax will look like. And an important thing here is that there has been no discussion regarding if the tax should be removed completely, but only I think someone might have to unmute themselves because we have some background noise. Another thing that's happened since our last meeting is that Brexit happened. This means that the United Kingdom is now a third country according to REACH, meaning that if you buy something from the UK, you now have the same responsibilities to ensure that it complies with the European legislation as if you would buy from any other third country. An interesting thing also is that the REACH regulation was introduced into British law at the date of Brexit. So they actually have the same chemical legislation in the UK, but it's like a separate separate union. So it's like having two different European unions. This means a lot of work, especially for companies producing or selling chemicals. And this law is called UK REACH. And an interesting thing as well is that according to the North Island Protocol, the European REACH regulation will continue to apply to Northern Ireland, while the rest of the European, the rest of the United Kingdom will have this UK REACH. And if you're interested in reading more about this, here are some good links, both from UK websites and also from ECHA. But it's mostly focused on issues regarding companies producing and selling chemicals. We also have had an update on the candidate list. We only had an addition of 2 different substances this time. The first one is a solvent, which is similar to a couple of ones that we already have in the electronics guide, but not in the textile guide, because it's mostly relevant for lithium-ion batteries, basically. We also have another substance, or actually it's a group of substances. That's why we don't have a single class number here. But these are inorganic compounds which might be used in the production of polyurethane or PVC. And we have included this in the guide under the heading inorganic compounds. So it's quite straightforward this time. We have 3 new proposed substances of very high concern. 1 flame retardant, 1 biocide, and 1 phenol, which is, this is also a group, but it's not used in high extent in like consumer products, but it's more like an intermediary chemicals in chemical production, basically. Yes, so now to the update of the chemicals guide, and as I said, we have 1 new substance of very high concern that we added to the guide, and this is this inorganic compounds. It's a very long name, and you can find it under the heading inorganic compounds or organostatic compounds in the guide. Another thing that we did was that we removed the separate heading of a solvent called 2-methoxyethyl acetate, and we have it now only included under the heading solvents, aliphatic organic solvents. This is something that we've planned to do before. We usually include solvents separately if they have very high importance or if they're new substances of very high concern. Then we want to highlight them as a separate heading. But it's been quite a while since this was introduced, and now we think this is a good thing to do. Another thing is that we've added a new table for the regulated phthalates, which are quite many, as you know, to give you a more clear picture on how they are regulated. We will look into that on the next slides. Also, since the last update, the more fast-track regulation came into force. And one consequence of this is that it overrides several national legislations on formaldehyde restrictions, meaning that the appendix that we have in Appendix 7 has also been updated. I have a slide on that as well. And then we did some clarification, minor language corrections, and we did some updates on the uses of the different chemicals to clarify things a bit more. But a lot of the language correction was that we edited the tempus forms for these restrictions that's being enforced, basically. Yes, and this is the new appendix, Appendix 8, where we listed the regulated phthalates. And as you can see here, we have listed the phthalates and with the class numbers, and also listed how they are restricted in different regulations. So if they're included in the candidate list, if they're listed in the list for authorization, Annex 14, and also if they have a restriction. And as you might know, it's restricted in entries 51, 52, and 72. So here you get a more clear picture of how the restrictions looks like, basically. On formaldehyde, since formaldehyde is restricted in CMR fast track with a limit value of 75 milligram per kilogram. This means that a lot of different national legislations has been removed within the European Union. And as you can see here, for France and Finland, they have restrictions for textile not in direct skin contact, meaning that this could still be something that they could enforce. But after talking to the different national chemical agencies, we have seen a trend that they actually remove their restrictions for these product groups as well. But for France and Finland, we haven't gotten this confirmed yet, but because they haven't replied. But we might actually remove the one for France and Finland as well. For a lot of other countries, the restrictions for things that not in direct skin contact has been removed as well. Yes. I will just shortly go through the updates in the electronics guide as well. Here we include both the two new substances of very high concern, because it's because this solvent is used in batteries, which is relevant for this product group. There's been some updates for how you're supposed to test your products according to the ROS regulation. And also, as you might be aware, there's a lot of different exemptions from of the restrictions in the ROS, and a lot of this has to be updated. And we'll come back to that in more detail. But that's something we also included in this update. And as for the in the textile guide, we have also updated the section on phthalate and included a new appendix. Yes, so there's a lot of exemptions within ROS that's due to, which has a past its due date, meaning that it should actually be looked if they should allow these exemptions to continue. But they are very far behind on this, meaning that these exemptions are still valid until they have made a decision on whether not to or to renew these exemptions. But there's some exemptions which has no application, meaning that well, companies are not using this and they will be removed, and they are specified here. And also, if they decide not to allow the exemption to continue, you still have a transition period. And yeah, there's very many different applications, and the time frame for decisions are 24 months, and they are years. They're very late, and so applications until years ago have still not been processed. So yeah, and those are the ones that basically there's no renewal because it hasn't been used. So this will actually be terminated. Yeah, and we can see that here we have listed of applications with request for renewal of these exemptions, and we can see that there's been requests sent in 2015 which hasn't been processed yet. So the ones that are terminated in this year won't be the ones that they prioritize first. So it might take a while before we even get a decision on that. There's a new thing is that there's an amendment to ROS. So if you sell recycled PVC in electrical windows, you have an exception here. But you have to mark it. This isn't so relevant for you, maybe. Yeah, and this is regarding the standard I mentioned before, that they have clarified a bit on how to do this. So there's a new IEC standard showing how you should analyze according to ROS, basically. This isn't really a new thing. It will not like affect the way you do it, but it's more like it clarifies this a bit more, basically. So it's not it shouldn't affect your ROS testing a lot, but it might actually help it a bit. Yeah, and here we have a list of different chemical methods for different substances restricted on the ROS. Yeah, and this is something that happens this year, so we wanted to address that. But since you don't sell so many medical devices, this might not be so interesting for you. But the restriction of phthalates also applied to this group this year. Yeah, so that was the part on ROS. Another interesting thing is that the Eco Design Directive also now has included restriction on chemicals, which is new. We are not so used to that because it has had requirements mainly for energy consumption and how you label the energy consumption. But now you also have product-specific requirements for some flame retardants. Yes, and this is related to the standards. For the textile guide, we have updated the standard for organic tin compounds. This is a quite new standard, which we included in the guide, the part 1 of this. But now they also published the part 2. So it's not a big change, but now you have 2 different numbers for this standard. And we also have a standard in progress, which we will include in the guide as soon as it's approved standard. And this is a standard for chlorinated paraffins. We already have a standard for leather in the guide, but we will soon then get a standard for textile materials as well. Yes, and here are some. We had a couple of slides focusing on where you still find different restricted chemicals or problematic chemicals in the products that we'll handle, and this is an extraction from the supervision reports from the Swedish Chemicals Agency. We can see that the focus for 2021 will be on pesticides used sold in the retail trade, but we will so like the textile or your product groups are not going to be the main focus, but the Swedish Chemicals Agency will also update us on their supervision plan later this month, I think. But of course, we also have municipalities' own supervision, which might very well include your products. This has been the three-year plan for chemical supervision. Yes, and Chemi also joined a supervision project, which was a joint European project, where they checked lead lamps and batteries. Yeah, and 25% of the control product did not meet the requirements of European legislation, which of course is quite alarming. As you might expect, the solder, the lead in solder was the most common fault here. So it's still the same issues that we have talked about before. But they also found cadmium, and they had found some phthalates and mercury, 2 different factors. You can see the results presented here, and there's the usual suspects. Basically, lead is overrepresented as issue, and also cadmium. But then we also find other problems, basically. and this is something that we talked about before, but the Swedish Chemicals Agency had a big project where they checked different jewelries, and here we also found that the levels of metals, lead and cadmium, were too high in quite a high amount of this product analyzed. An interesting thing that we haven't talked about before is that there's a question about should a product that just passes through customs be regarded as a product already imported to the European Union, because you might consider it not to be put on the market yet. But according to the environmental prosecutors, they think that this good stop that customs should be considered as imported, meaning that this is like a legal problem, basically. And if you're interested in this report, you can find a link here. So, and if you look into this product group, it's clothes, shoes, and accessories, and there you find that they have analyzed quite a large number of products. But this is mostly because jewelry is included in this, and this was quite a big project. But it's also quite easy to detect this metals, and also quite cheap to do the analysis. So that's probably why they've analyzed so many. But we can see that for the other product groups, we don't have such a clear issue. But in addition to the jewelry, bags and cases, also have quite high percentage of products where you have unallowed levels of restricted substances in the products. Yeah, and this is another report, basically, which you can look into in more detail if you're interested. Yes. Yeah, so before I take a break, I would like to also show you some slides from the presentation that the Chemi had on this new project. I'm just gonna open the presentation. This is unfortunately in Swedish because we didn't get the PowerPoint, but I hope I can give you a short overview. You can follow it still. Yeah. So do you see a PowerPoint now, or a PDF file with the Swedish Chemicals? Okay, yes. Good, thank you. So this was a quite big project. It was over several years, where they looked into hazardous chemicals in different different consumer products, where textiles, of course, was one of them. And they wanted to know about dangerous chemical substances present in products which hasn't yet been restricted within the European Union. And it's part of a mission from the Swedish government to the Swedish Chemicals Agency. And you can find the report for this overall project already, but there you don't find so much information on this specific product group. But this will be presented in March in this year, so next month basically. But we got a preview through this presentation, and what they've done is that they analyzed 35 different types of textiles, where 24 of these products were clothes, 2 were masquerades, costumes, and then we had some home textiles as well. And they had chose this as for the different types of fiber types as well. So you had cotton, wool, polyester, viscose, acrylic, nylon, and some mixtures with elastane as well. And they bought this in 2018. They bought the majority in Swedish stores, but they also bought free goods from non-European e-commerce companies. And the reason why they didn't have more products that tested were basically that it's quite expensive to do these testings. Yeah, so they did a non-target screening to get information on the different substances that existed. And then they analyzed the data from the screening and chose dangerous substances, which they wanted to confirm that they really were there. Then you also get, in this next step, you also get information on the limit values, which you don't get when you do this non-target screening. They found like 50,000 different chemicals from this non-target screening that could be present. And from that, they found 431 potential candidates, which like had the data profile, which they narrowed down to 62 different substances, which they did quantitative analysis on. And 13 of these substances they found in levels that they could measure, and 12 of them they did a risk assessment for. And here you have a picture on in what kind of materials you find these different substances and in what levels. The number of substances you find in different materials. So polyester is overrepresented here, but I think that's also because you have more samples of polyester and nylon. So this might not be like a really fair picture on how it would look like if you have a bigger sample number. Yes. They have different exposure scenarios. This is quite interesting because this is like a new method basically. You can hopefully read more about it in the report later on. But they did risk assessment for different ages, different exposure scenarios. And they didn't find increased risk for negative health effects for these substances. So it's isocyanates, phenol, 1-phthalate, 1-siloxane, and 2 flame retardants. This siloxane is, of course, also persistent chemicals. So it's dangerous for the environment. So it's still problematic, but it's not problematic for us, according to this risk assessment that they did. But they did find 4 different substances that they thought had an increased negative health effect. And we have one for quinoline, one for phenol, and 2 different dispersed dyes. Quinoline is already restricted in the semi-fast track restriction, and they didn't find levels above the restriction limit of 25 milligram per kilogram. But they think lower levels could still be problematic, and this was big discussion at this meeting we had last Friday. The two different dispersed.
Ursäkta, Mikael. Excuse me. I think someone needs to mute their phone because there is. We hear you. I hear you twice.
Okay.
So if everyone could check. Yeah, let's just try to continue. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So these two dispersed dyes, one of them has a harmonized classification, meaning that it will be covered by the proposed restriction on skin sensitizing substances. The other one doesn't yet have a harmonized classification, but might after this this investigation, basically. Yeah, and I think, I mean, here there's some more information about the different substances here, basically.
Okay, I would have a question.
Yeah.
So they analyzed the concentrations and then did the risk assessment based on actual exposure concentrations. Is this correct? I mean, is this like a model where they really looked into
Yeah, they looked into exposure scenario, but okay. And this was based on the levels that they found in the clothing,
okay,
or this product.
Okay, thanks.
But how it's done, you can read more. It's really quite interesting. And
yeah, sounds very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some information about these substances and the levels you find in the study. But none of these goods had any substances in levels that was against the current legislation. So there's no supervision on this. But all of the companies who had substances which they address has been contacted. They're going to look into if they need some new actions regarding quinoline. They're going to look into the possible harmonized classification for dispersed red 16, which doesn't have this already. And they're going to continue this work with non-target screening to identify new substances, basically. Yeah. So that's that, basically. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question. Isam from Heli Hansen. Do they usually publish what exactly did they test, or do they just or which brand, which type of garment they took, or only just or only they mention the material they choose?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, they definitely won't publish the brand. They will publish information about the color and the material, but I don't know exactly how descriptive they will be on the product they
Okay, so the presentation you're showing this is the detail they have at this moment, right? So they haven't.
No, they haven't published the final report yet. So okay. Yeah, but I mean, that question, Christine probably would be able to answer, the writer of the report, but I can't remember it from the presentation. Anyone else remember?
And I just know that. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
No, I just know from other reports, for instance, for PFOS chemicals that Kemi did, they really tried to not mention any brand names to keep it general. Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, what kind of what will be interesting, not the brand, of course, but what really interesting is what type of garments they actually picked. Did they pick like standard outdoor? Did they pick like fashion garments that they put
Mm.
best next to the skin.
Mm.
Yeah.
But as I understood her, they will in the report present as much detail as they
Cool.
can, both about methods and materials they choose, but they will be careful not to expose any brands. And also in the beginning of this presentation, as I remember it, there was also a closer description, or if it, I don't know if it was written or if it was what she said, because I remember that she explained it's this many type of this many garments from the children's collections, and it's this many garments from. I remember this, but not if it was written or not. But it's yeah, since she told us, it can't be. It's probably going to be in the report as well, since she
Will
was
you keep
open
an
about
eye
it.
on the report and share it with us once it's come out? Or
Yes, we actually made a promise to Shemi that we would do that, so
cool.
we will. Yeah. So this was what I wanted to present now before the break. So my suggestion now is that we take a 15-minute break and meet again at 9:45, and hopefully you're ready for some other presentations now.
So, okay, yeah, we had Angelica Baschinger from the fire department in Borås, who presented the work that they have been doing together with the Substitution Center, or it was funded by the Substitution Center. And there were two different projects. And it's about the sustainability, flame retardant, plastic, and composite. So we can take the next page. And the two projects that she presented was that they have been developing a tool for sustainable flame retardants products. And then also she presented the work where they have been looking into alternatives to halogen-free fire protections for ABS. So just a short background. What is fire? What is the actual cause of it? And you have the three different parameters as oxygen, heat, and fuel. And we can go to the next slide. So the different mechanisms for the fire protection then is that removing the combustible gases that can give radical reactions, cool down to eliminate the endothermic reactions. And you can also add protective layers between those different parameters as heat, fuel, and oxygen. And also be using dripping, as you mentioned, and that's material that melts and drips away instead of burning. Yeah, there are different ways of fire protection. You can add additives in the plastic as mineral, halogen, phosphorus, nitrogen-based flame retardants, and so on. Surface protection, you can use, for example, paint and carpets with flame retardant, or inherently flame retardant plastics. For example, polymers that easily form. Clear requirements then is the spreading of the flame is important to evaluate, the heat generation, smoke protection, and toxicity of the smoke. But something to keep in mind is that if you optimize one parameter, so here's then about the first project where they have been developing a tool for flame retardant plastic and composites. So what is important when you look into substitution or alternative assessment work is to have a cross-disciplinary team. And in this case, they have competences within fire on our homepage. I don't think we will not show that now, but you can look into that if you're interested.
I just have a question. That was in English or in Swedish?
Well, she has some pages actually that are in English that is describing it. But I think, yeah, no, it is in English actually.
Yeah.
The tool is described in English. You're right.
Thank you.
And then to actually the other project where they have been looking into halogen-free flame retardants for ABS. And the vision here is reduce the use of toxic and environmentally harmful substances through systematic evaluation of cost-effective, sustainable flame retardant systems for ABS. So first of all, they did some external monitoring, and what they came up with was that it's a limited number of studies of halogen-free flame retardants in ABS. It is not possible to compare different systems due to different materials, processes, and methods. And there are almost no studies on mechanical properties and no comparison with halogenated systems possible. Yeah, no, that's fine. So the question is, what do I need? So they came up with kind of a process, a systematic evaluation of these halogen flame retardants free systems in ABS. So in the first phase, they have a comparison of different phosphorus-based flame retardant with each other and a halogenated reference. And then they combine the most promising phosphorus flame retardants with synergists. In the next step, they picked the most promising ones and added some more other synergists. And in the last step, they optimized the composition of the most promising systems. And also they needed to add smoke suppressions. So what they evaluated was the toxicity, cost, fire properties, and mechanical properties. So when we go into the toxicity aspects, they looked into the candidate list, the PRIO guide, and the SEN list, and inductive disruptive, is that how you say it in English? The green screen score and hazard statement. And what they concluded from this one is that the aluminium dithylphosphonate and ammonium polyphosphate showed the best profile. Is there something else we want to say about this? No.
No, I mean it's interesting also to look into how they handle the data gaps, but I think you can get more information from the report on that.
Of course, there were data gaps here, which is not really shown, but yeah.
But it seems at least that there is some alternatives which are better than the halogenated substances. Yeah, they might be not optimum, but you can see that there is some.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is also important when you look into the tax for the electronic tax, because that targets flame retardants basically. So this is another clear picture of that there are good and bad options from a toxicological perspective when you try to replace halogenic flame retardants basically.
Yeah, thank you for the input. So here are some results from the fire testing. And for the heat release, the suggested combinations that they were working on showed better results. And also for the smoke production. Okay, we can take the next. For the mechanical properties, unfortunately, the new systems that they looked into performed worse than for the halogenated flame retardants. Okay, for a conclusion, what they tested was mechanical properties, the flame spreading, heat release, smoke development, and cost, and then look into the toxicity. And if we look into the halogenated flame retardant, they have better mechanical properties than for the system, the combinations of the phosphorus flame retardant that they were testing. So the subsystems have potential and scope for optimization, but a major disadvantage was mechanical properties then. And mechanical properties and fire requirements are crucial for the choice of systems. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think that I don't remember what Angelica said there for the continuing work about these new systems. But didn't she mention that maybe they could optimize the system to get the mechanical properties a little bit better, that they were hoping to be able to look into that?
Yeah, I think.
Continue, Stefan.
I think we had a discussion that she said there is room for some optimization, yeah, with their systems, yeah, because you could think about that you maybe have them in a reactive form, which would make the materials more stable, yeah. So there's room, yeah, but yeah.
But it was interesting, I think, where she said that they couldn't find so much data about the mechanical properties of different alternatives. I mean, one key aspect is, of course, the performance, which is important. And of course, environmental aspects and costs also.
And I think this picture shows that it's not always so easy to do a good substitution, because there's very many different parameters involved, not only toxicity, which we mostly focus on.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have any questions or comments?
Hi, Isam from Hilly Hansen. I just have a question. You said that there might be a continuation of the work here. Do you think, for example, like all these are nice result, but this is more like chemical treatment. So for example, from where we come from, it's not really 100% related, because we try to avoid this chemical treatment anyway. Because it's very difficult to navigate, because even if you pass REACH, you have also the Prop 65 that you have to be in compliance with. So we're trying only use this self-fire resistance chemical, of course, like metacrylic and what's the name, paramide and stuff like that in our garments. Do you think this can be compared with the performance of such material as well, just to see if how's the property compared to the or what do you call it, fire retardant by polymer material as well?
Is it anyone else? Yeah, it's a good question. From my perspective, I honestly don't know. Mikael, Malin, Stefan, do you have any comments about this?
It's a very interesting question, which I think, the kind of material they look into here is more related to electrical applications, or you have a lot of ABS in your computers, for instance. That's a quite common application, and I think in the automotive industry as well. So this, and in both those applications, the flame retardancy is quite important. But as you say, I think it's definitely a good idea to avoid this, especially the halogenated flame retardants in the textile applications. But it's hard to say what would be the best performance. Yeah, Stefan.
I see.
So as I understand it, these are systems you can add to materials that are kind of defined. Yeah. So if you have, for instance, a sofa or like textile, you add this to get the flame retardancy, while there are other materials like polymers that are inherent, not so flammable. Yeah. So this is the difference. So I think you can't really compare this case. Yeah. I think this was your question. Or?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a different case. Yeah, because the kind of materials that are inherent flame retardant, you might not use for some of the applications with these additives you are used, yeah, because you would not make a sofa out of it on ABS or something like this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a very good question. Hard to answer. And any other questions?
And I also think that as Angelic, I think, mentioned that one system can work in one kind of ABS combination, but maybe not in another. It's very difficult because it also relates to the manufacturing process and other additives used in the system and so on. So it is challenging with substitution. And usually you have to test on your own system and evaluate.
But the focus for this work hasn't been textiles when they did this either. It's good to know that when you read the report.
I also think this mechanical properties, this ABS is a very flexible polymer. It has this kind of two phases. Yeah, that's why you use it for instance, for the indoor car compartments and plastic parts. So these mechanical properties might play a very important role here, also for textiles, but for other applications not. So you really have to look into where you would use it. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that kind of the challenge with plastic? By adding additives, you actually can kind of change the properties of the plastic. It can affect the properties of the plastic quite dramatically.
Yeah.
Okay, but then I think, well, thank you, Anna-Karin, for this presentation. And of course, you can contact Angelica Wastinger. She's more than happy to answer any questions on this. Then I give the word over to Malin, who's going to give you a recap of Birgitta Lossman's presentation on extended producer responsibility.
Yeah.
Do you want to share?
I will do that. Yeah, maybe I can share the presentation. Let me see.
I'm gonna make you
where did it go? Here.
Co-host. No.
Screen. Can I share only the? No. It appears that that this file was not the top priority in my. Let's see now. If I try to share this, do you see the PDF with the?
Yes, we do.
EPR?
Yes.
Very good. Or do you also see yourself? No?
No.
No? That's also positive. So there. All right. Yes, we had Birgitta Lossman presenting at the meeting, and she's been investigating an extended producer responsibility for textiles in Sweden. Because, well, let's continue here. And she also had some colleagues helping her out. Well, maybe we should mention already that Birgitta has made this investigation, but now she has finished working with it, basically. So it was kind of her to present for us, but now the responsibility for this work is at Miljödepartementet. So, and what's that in English? Ministry of Environment, maybe?
I think EPA is
EPA? What does it mean?
Environmental Protection Agency, or maybe that's not the correct one. That's Naturvårdsverket.
Yeah, yeah, this is the ministry.
Yeah,
that handles this. However, she was kind enough to present it for us. Yes, because there was an agreement between the government and Centerpartiet and Liberalerna in 2019 that they would implement and make an EPR, an extended producer responsibility for textile. There will also be such EPRs eventually in Europe, within the EU, and those will be national as it seems. And Sweden wants to be first and show the way and be ambitious. So last year in 2020, this was investigated by Birgitta and her colleagues. And they were supposed to look at the design of an extended producer's responsibility and how it can be best suited to the systems that are already existing for collections of textile in Sweden. So the goal is to achieve an environmental good by increased collection of textile, so that there will be more textile products or textile waste available for reuse and for materials recycling. Another goal is that the collection of textile waste will be paid by the producers. Rather than by our taxes. So this is the situation today. We collect approximately 145,000 ton. We put approximately 145,000 tons of textile at the market in Sweden every year. And smaller fractions of this is collected. And a large portion, the 87,000 tons, end up in our household waste or at the waste collection centrals or recycling collection points. They have put quantitative goals on this, which are that they want to reduce the amount of textile that end up in the general waste fraction, what we call brännbart in Sweden. So it's quite ambitious. It's quite an ambitious goal of 90% decrease in the amount that ends up in brännbart by 2036. Another goal is that by 2028, at least 90% of the textile that has been collected should be prepared for reuse or materials recycling. And here they suggest that reuse will be prioritized over materials recycling because they need to follow the waste hierarchy. And also, as they show later in the presentation, as I remember it, there's also a better environmental gain if you reuse textiles, obviously, than if you use them for making new materials. That is also an energy and materials that you also need energy and materials in that processing steps. Yes, she also wanted to point out that a producer's responsibility, it covers the collection of textile materials and textile waste. Due to other legislations, it's not possible to make the producers responsible for collection of textile for reuse. We have today many organizations collecting textile for reuse and also companies collecting their textile at their selling points. But it's the legislation is such that we can only put the responsibility on the producers for the textile that becomes actual waste. So there is a differentiation between what is textile waste and what is textile for reuse and for selling and remake and using in other applications. Also, she wanted to point out that the producer's responsibility, it covers the collection of the waste, but it doesn't cover the actual reuse or the actual materials recycling, and it doesn't cover other measures that would make customers more consume in a more sustainable way. So it's quite limited what can be done within the producer's responsibility, and it should more be seen as a part of a palette of different measures that would give us a more sustainable textile and textile waste use. Important will be that the structures that are already there for collecting textile for reuse or recycling will be kept within the new system, and that those actors will still be able to collect and use textile for reuse. The last point here is that they made also a questionnaire, a quite large questionnaire, as I understand, and asked different households and consumers how they want to give their textile waste to recycling. But they couldn't find that there was one way that was beneficial over another, and the consumers wanted to leave their textile waste in many different ways. I mean, sometimes some wanted it picked up at their house, and some wanted to leave it at ICA Maxi or at the recycling points. So this was very different. So they realized that they need to have a system for collection that is simple and where people can leave their textile waste in different ways. So they will not restrict that in this investigation. And that brings us also to one of the aims they have had when writing this, when designing this producer's responsibility. It is that they will dictate what the producers must achieve, and that's the quantitative goals I mentioned in the beginning, that they need to collect large fractions of textiles, but they will not dictate how the producers must achieve this. And the reason for that is that they want to keep it possible for the producers to shape the system and be inventive in how they want to fulfill their responsibility, so that they can keep down the costs. So it will not be much detail on that in this suggestion. Yes, I don't remember actually what she spoke about here, because I think it's been mentioned before. But it's supposed to be easy to make the right decisions, and especially for consumers. And here we're back at that we want to say only what should be achieved and not how. I'll continue. There is a definition of textiles and what textiles will be included in the EPR. And since it's been decided that reuse is most important, and that's where we have the largest environmental potential, or largest potential for environmental good, the textiles included are only textiles where there is a good chance that they will be reused. So it's clothing and bags and textile accessories, or accessories made of textile, and bags, home textile, such things, and not industrial textiles and other things. And they have chosen to use the custom codes to define those textiles, as that was what the producers that they have talked to. Maybe you, I'm not sure. because they had other plans from the beginning, and they ended up with using the custom codes because that's what's supposed to be easiest for the producers. Now, this is the question defining who is the producer, and the producer is a company established in Sweden who makes textile available for the first time, but it's also companies not established in Sweden who sell textile directly to consumers or other end users. The collection system. There will be rules that each collection system, well, it will work like this probably, or the other EPRs work like this, that there are collection systems, and then the producers, they pay a collection system to take care of collection of textile waste. And you will need to have a permission to start and to keep a collection system. And those collection systems, they must be suitable and appropriate according to different rules, that they are available and that there are enough collection points for all inhabitants in Sweden, and for all geographical areas in Sweden. And this is the question about what textile waste is included. And now we're not on the article level, but rather that it's both the textile that's collected as waste in connection to professional business, but it's also the collection of waste while selling textile, if you do that. It's the municipal collection of waste. We have that in some parts of the country. There is already a municipal collection of waste. And there's collection of waste from remakers and from non-profit organization. This means that all these systems that are already there, where waste is collected, they can still do it, and the remake actors, they can still use what they want to use from the textiles that they collect. The same with the non-profit organizations, but what they don't use is defined as textile waste, and that they need to leave to the collection system. Yes, this is again now that Birgitta wanted to emphasize that the producer's responsibility is just one part of a system to make us more sustainable with textile waste, and there is or with textile use or consumer behavior. So there will be a need to have other measures together with the producer responsibility to ensure that we have a better consumers or more sustainable consumers behavior in the future. And in chapter 11, they have made several recommendations on other measures that need to be developed, because the producer responsibility in itself will not make any environmental good. I mean, it only covers the collection of textiles. So you will have large quantities of textiles that has been collected that can be used for remake or reuse or materials recycling. But the actual environmental good, you will not have it until you actually do use the textiles again. And also in chapter 11, they have also suggested some measures that are needed to ensure better chemicals use in textile recycling, including labeling and traceability and ban of undesired chemicals, but those are not part of the producer responsibility. consequences of the producer responsibility is that 7,000 or more than 7,000 companies will be fined as producers in Sweden. If the goals are achieved by 2036, each consumer, each person will only put less than 1 kilo of textile waste in the general household waste fraction, and 8.4 kilo for each person will be prepared for reuse and materials recycling. The cost for the producer, or the cost for the consumer who buys clothes, for example, will not be very high. They have calculated this, and if you want to know how they calculate, it's described in the investigation. But what they end at is 33 öre for one t-shirt. That's how much more expensive it will get. So meaning that the cost is there to pay for the waste management. It's not there, or it will not be able to have an effect on people's or producers' choices, since this cost is so small. And the consequences that were discussed were that if we can double the lifetime of a piece of cloth or a textile by using it once more, we will almost halve the climate impact. With materials recycling, we can decrease the climate impact with about 10%, which was much less. And that's why reuse is prioritized over materials recycling. It's also been defined that the reuse of textiles waste as remake products gives a larger environmental benefit compared to materials recycling. And that is all. And then Birgitta again mentioned that this investigation is on referral, and that it can be answered to the Miljödepartementet. So more or less, she said that she's out. We can ask her still questions if we really want to, but she prefers if we address them to Miljödepartementet in our referral. RISE will answer to this referral, but we will not do it as representatives of Kemikaliegruppen. We will do it representing RISE. And we discussed different options for this, actually, and we think that what we could have done is to, if you want to answer to this referral, if companies want to answer to this referral, we could support you and help you out with that. But if we address them as RISE, we need to answer it from a RISE perspective, and we are going to do that. From the chemicals group, or the chemicals group at RISE, we are involved in this, and we are looking at the chemicals issues here, and we are also involving our colleagues here who work more with textiles recycling and who are also interested in this. Yes, I think that's all from me, and all I was planning to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malin. Is there any questions?
Hi, I have a question. Do we have a timeline here? Can you explain? I'm assuming this will implement in Sweden only. Will that be spread also to the EU? What's the timeline we are looking at for this to be a law, or a legal thing we have to comply with?
I don't know. It's possible that the timeline is there, but I haven't checked. The timeline for the referral is mid-March, but that's not relevant for what you're asking. No, we could get back on that maybe.
Isn't it like 2023 for this one? And I mean, there's like a EU directive that you should have this in 2024, 2025. We have to maybe come back to you on that, the exact timeline. But I mean, so this will be implemented in Sweden like 1 year before it will be mandatory in the European Union.
It's important for them that we are doing this first, so they will probably press this through.
Yeah, I think France has done something similar before as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's that's a very good question. We can actually look that up during the break and come back to you on that, because it's quite easily checked. But I think it's like 2023 in Sweden and 2024 in the EU. But then we will come back to you after the break.
Okay, cool. But how they will check though? How can they see that the company is meeting the 90% requirement? I mean, how?
That I know. Because they are checking. Practically, they are checking how much textile is in the waste fraction. So they will make plockanalyser, they call it, picking analysis. I don't know. They take the actual waste bins and they check how much textile is there, how large the fraction of textile is in our waste.
Okay,
and that's what they want to decrease.
Per producer?
No, there will be for the producer, the cost will be depending either on the weight of textile that you put on the market or on the number of items that you put on the market. Okay, so at the end, this will trickle down to a tax we have to pay. Yes, a cost per kilo or per item.
You won't pay it as a tax. You will pay it as to the actors who will administer the collection system. So it's like similar to plastic packaging, for instance. That if you put packaging materials on the market, you have to pay a small fee for that to fund the collection system.
And the cost or the actual fee will depend on the cost that they will have to reach those goals.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Understood. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. I have a question as well, Sanna from Laundria Textiles. I'm a little bit curious about the producer because it says that the one who is established in Sweden and for the first time makes the textile available for somebody else. Is that more or less based on who will pay for the tolls when you will get the goods into Sweden, or is it like actually putting it on the market for consumers?
As I've understood it, it's to put it on the market for consumers.
Okay.
Yes.
That writing is because you don't want to have the fee paid twice for the same product.
No, exactly, because since we will sometimes import the goods, but not always, to our customers, and our customers are the ones who will actually put the products on the market for consumers.
I think you might have a similar thing as we discussed with the possible textile tax. That I think you can probably have different arrangements there, but someone has to pay.
Of course. Okay. Well, thanks for that.
Hi, just another question. It might be also been discussed before in Swedish or whatever. Just regarding responsibility of the producer. So of course, so if we will pay the player in the Swedish market who's actually trying to reduce the cost, or who are trying to reduce the waste to landfill, for example, right? And just for me, it came down to that responsibility for us whether or not to produce recyclable items or non-recyclable item is almost the same. So technically, the collection is the most important here, that 90%, whether it's been recycled or reused. Just for me, for example, if we're trying to produce 100% polyester so it can be recyclable at the end, of course, that will help the people who, or the players, the parties who's collecting. But the question for me just seems to be just, yes, you pay, they collect, and it just, the responsibility of changing the material is just got super minimized in that sense.
Yes.
Will we have any responsibility on what the players will be also doing with that? Because if I'm only paying them to collect, why should I care? Just that's
Exactly,
the personal question.
yes.
It's like, why would I plan all that just in a way that just regarding achieving a goal, just not by how to achieve that goal?
That's actually, that issue is discussed in the investigation. She didn't mention it at the meeting, but there is a discussion about whether this the cost you pay should be differentiated depending on the item. Unless you say, I mean, if the item is more recyclable, if it's more better, I mean, it can be different factors there. That is more easily recyclable, that it's better quality, that it is an item where you have less dangerous chemicals, or where you expect that the customers will use it for longer. It can be different things.
Okay.
That you want to benefit in a more sustainable textile industry, or more sustainable textile use behavior, but that it's not directly covered by the extended producer responsibility. There is a possibility to differentiate the cost, but there's two issues here. One is that the cost is very low, 23 öre for one t-shirt is what they estimate. So if you double that, it will still be very little. And the other thing is that they wanted to also wait out the other producer responsibilities in EU, because they believe if they are going to have a differentiated cost, it should be differentiated the same way throughout EU, because many of you are acting on the whole European market, and then the cost should be differentiated in the same way so that you benefit the same behavior everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's I mean, I don't know how they will achieve it with 23 öre. I think they need to increase that several 100%, I believe, if they wanted to have an impact.
I see what you mean. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out. So it's if the product is recyclable, there might be a different cost for it, but
not now.
Not now. Yeah, it might make more sense, but it's not the responsibility of the producer then to make sure this garment is recyclable or usable.
No.
By this.
Unfortunately, yeah.
No, well, you're saying unfortunately, but there is a massive technical implementation for this. That's for me. At this moment, I'm looking at it from a technical point of view. When you are producing a technical jacket, you have polyester on the face, you have polyurethane on the back, on the center, and then you have polyamide on the back, and then you have a glue in the middle, and then you have DWR on the face, and then you have trim, which comes in a completely different types of polyester. It's not PET, it's just complete. It's from the polyester family, but it's come from a completely different family, different types of polyester. And then trying to make all that in a single material, and to be honest, that's counterproductive, because let's say you would like to convert that to polyester, then that's when you have to use polyester membrane, maybe polyester glue, unless you accept kind of contamination in the PU glue, and then you have to change all that to different trims. When you choose different membrane, that's mean you are automatically classified in a certain technical group, that you cannot use a microporous membrane. That's mean your performance, your jackets, is automatically in a single category.
Yes.
From a technical point of view, that's a little bit very, yeah, technically everyone can produce a single item that's look the same, perform the same. Yeah, so yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit difficult. It's also very important to know where the responsibility come in, because that will help us design the garment that way.
But it's the cost differentiation, if there will be one, at least as it was discussed here. I mean, they cannot, this report doesn't rule what EU will decide for differentiation of costs, obviously.
Of course.
But as it's discussed, it's not only going to be, I mean, if they don't want also only to have differentiation on recyclability, I mean, then if they start using differentiated costs, they will use it for different parameters that are, and so maybe your jacket will be compared to similar jackets. And if you can make it with less hazardous chemicals, you will have a lower cost. Or if you can make it, do you understand what I mean? That
yes,
there can be different parameters, and I understand this product is difficult to make it in one material, so that can never be your goal. But then maybe, yeah.
As long as I'm so. Compliance with the law does not mean I have to make it recyclable, or I have to make it this. I know it's unfortunate, as you said, like
yes,
ideally you would be everything to be reusable, of course, but this will mean mass changing a technology has been existing in the market for the last 50 years, which is, it might happen in the next 50 years. But it cannot just simply happen in a switch, like you flick the switch and then all of a sudden everything is recyclable.
No.
We have to be a little bit realistic with that, of course, you know. Yeah.
I think also, and this, we also discussed this after the last meeting, that this proposal out of material perspective is super complicated. Yeah, so it's not really, I mean, it doesn't, you collect all the stuff and then what to do and how to recycle and how to separate different materials, and so it's really a super complex question. Yeah, and I think maybe they don't get this depth of this question. Yeah, and I think it's good from my side to comment on it.
Thank you very much for the update. I really appreciate if you keep us updated with these kind of issues as well, because it all pointed back again to the chemical, to the materials and polymer use, and it's good to keep an eye on that. And I'd appreciate if you can give me feedback on timelines or a rough time for how things are working out, and just to see. Yeah, thank you.
I think, I mean, it's a very interesting question that you ask, Isam, but I think like you should not only look at the material recyclability of a product, you should also look at the life length of that product. And I think in this proposal, they really emphasize that. So I mean, if you could use this jacket twice the life length compared to another jacket, that should have higher. That means a higher benefit for the environment. So I mean, and even if that means that you have to like burn it at the end of its life.
I might have a personal opinion here. Is just that yeah, it depends on when is the burning. Yeah, if you lose your jacket for a really long time, and in comparison to the what do you call it, to the energy used in making of this jacket and how long it lasted you, and then you burn it at the end, there are some published opinions that this might be actually good, environmentally friendly, but I know some people don't like when you say that. But
it depends, I think, because what they also suggest here is that there needs to be much work done with consumer behaviors also to achieve this, because like Mikael said, the producer responsibility is only the collection of the textile waste, but we need also to get consumers to reuse and to use their material. If they have a good quality product that they can use for a lifetime, you need to make them use it for a lifetime also. You don't have the benefit only because the jacket is good enough. because if the consumer thinks it's not fashionable enough after 5 years and burn it anyways, then you don't get the benefit. So this is much about consumer behavior also, and that's not included in the EPR, obviously, but it's included in the general strategy on textiles. Yeah. That you need to achieve, that you need to, there's different measures that are necessary, and consumer behaviors is one, and also the actual usage of this. I mean, now we will have, hopefully within quite soon, we will have large fractions of textile materials that can be reused and can be used for materials recycling. But we don't have a sector or an industrial sector that actually do that. So the environmental gain, it's not there just because we have the EPR. It's
the infrastructure coming with it. Yeah. Cool.
I think it would really need is like a structural thinking about the whole thing with some scenarios and textiles and materials, and also some more deeper calculations whether it makes sense to burn something in the end or recycle it from an energy perspective. And how to realize the recyclability. And I mean, I think it's really quite a big project from my perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one comment from me here. I have a son actually who is 16. He came for half year ago, he came with his jeans and told me, "Mom, I want to remake these ones for another design." So yeah, Malin, the consumer behavior is also important. But maybe the new generation has a different perspective.
That's very nice to hear, Anna-Karin. I think it's time for another break. So we will rejoin again at 10:50 for the last part of this meeting. And during this break, we will also look up this timeline and get you information on that. So see you again in 15 minutes.